Hi again, everybody. It's Mr. Han. I hope you're having a great week. Today, what I want to show you is how to read information from a file. So this is called file IO, so input output. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at how to get information out of a separate file and use it in our program. So I'll walk you through the sections of code here, and then we'll talk about where to save the file at the end. So what I want my program to do today is I want it to be a piece of software that a sports league could use. So at the end of the regular season, I would like this software to be able to output the teams that are in the playoffs and some stats about those teams that are in the playoffs. So if you were trying to predict, attendance for playoff games on average, you'd have to look at what teams were in the playoffs and what their attendance was like throughout the regular season in order to maybe extrapolate or make a prediction about their attendance. So at the start here, I have a variable for the number of teams. It's going to be an integer. I have a double for their average attendance. I have a double for their average wins. And I have this integer total, which I'll use in a number of different places. So first thing I do is I ask the user how many teams are going to be in the playoffs. So depending on the league, it might be 4, it might be 8. So I'm asking how many teams are going to be in the playoffs. I get that next integer from the keyboard. Okay. And then I close off that scanner. Now my next set of variables here are arrays. And what's going to happen is these arrays are going to work in parallel. That is, the information that's stored in them will be parallel to, for instance, the team name. The very first team name that's stored will be parallel to its number of wins, will be parallel to its attendance. The number of entries in that array will actually be determined by the user. So that's that information. This number of teams that we get here will actually determine how big these arrays are and how much information we get from our data file. Now down here's where the magic happens. This is where we're going to get information from the data file, and there isn't too much additional code here that's necessary to make this happen. We're going to use two objects to make this happen. So the first object is this file reader. Okay, so I have the file reader there. I've created the object. I called it incoming data of this file reader class. And in order to initiate it, I have to pass it this argument, which is the name of the file it's going to read. Let's have a look at that file right now. Here it is right here. It's called my league data. So right now I have 3 teams in there, but we could add some more. Okay. We could have a Jayhawks. Maybe they had 6 wins, and maybe they had an average attendance of 900. And my next team would be Blue Jays. And let's say they had 4 wins and they had an average attendance of 700. So this is my file here, and it's a pretty simple setup. It's going to go team name, team wins, team attendance, and then repeat for the next team. Okay, so let's leave that off to the side for now, and let's go back to the code. So this incoming data object is going to be populated by my league data.dat, which I've called this file. Okay. Then I create a buffer read object. So I've just called it buffer. And what a buffer does is acts like a pipeline of information coming from that file. So it reads what's in this file, character by character, line by line, and feeds that into my program, and allows me to grab that information in a very systematic way. So what I can do now is I can actually use a loop, okay, to populate my arrays and read line by line through that file. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go buffer, which is that buffer object here. Okay, and I'm going to read the first line in buffer object. Now there's a number of different methods that belong to this object. Read line takes in a whole line. You can do read, which will take in the next character in that line. And we'll talk about the .close method here in a second. So there's a number of different methods. We're going to use read line to read line by line through the data file. So the first line that it's going to read, okay, is Tigers. It's going to save that in team name number 0, index 0, so the very first team name. The next thing it's going to read is line number 2, which is those 6 wins. In order to do that, it's going to come in as a string. We have to parse it to an int. We're going to use the integer class to do that, and it'll get saved in team wins at index 0. And then team attendance, okay, that was 789. Same thing here. We're going to read in that line, and we're good to go. This is going to loop around for however number of teams I've entered as playoff teams. At the end, I use this buffer.close to close off that stream because I'm not bringing any more information in from there. In order for all of this to work, I have to use a try catch setup here. It won't work without it. So my catch, what I'm looking for is an IO exception. I call it E. Okay, and if that happens, I just use this quick system.out to say sorry we didn't find the file. Okay. After that, what I have is a section of code that says here's your playoff teams. I loop back through, print out the teams that made the playoffs. Okay, and then I loop through, find their average attendance and find their average wins. I then display that out to the screen. So let's have a look at how this works. So I'm going to go play it here. I'm going to say maybe only the first 3 teams make the playoffs. I'm going to use 3. So the playoff teams that make the playoffs are the Tigers, the Hawks, the Hurricanes. Their average attendance was 899, and the average wins for those teams was 5. So that was a successful build. Now, one other thing I need to mention before I leave here is that this data file has to be saved where my NetBeans project is. Now, there is a way to access data files, not in this way where we can use the directory, but for right now, the simplest way is to save this. I go save as, and I actually have to find where my NetBeans file is. So for me, it was on my documents. I have a new folder for this year. It's new folder 3. This is my 3rd year doing e-learning, and the project was called file.io. So I save my league data.dat file right there. I hit save or replace it. Sure, it's going to be saved there. Now it's part of the project. So that's reading from a file. Next week we'll look at how to output to a file, but this could be handy when we go to do our summative at the end of the year. So remember that we did this tutorial. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thanks again for watching.